One of the two most influential Jewish sects in the New Testament is the Sadducees. They occur often during Jesus' ministry and also during the apostles' ministry in the book of Acts. But how well do we truly understand them? Well, in this video, I will be doing a comprehensive study on the Sadducees. We'll be looking at the different names by which they occur in the Bible, their origin, role, beliefs, and where the name Sadducee comes from. I believe that this historical and biblical analysis of the group will cause you to appreciate Jesus and the early disciples more and examine your own heart for some Sadduceeism too. It's coming up. Before we jump in, just a big thanks to Merrill Unger for his excellent Bible dictionary and F.F. Bruce for his New Testament history. These two books are my go-to books when I want to study any historical or archaeological topic of things in the Bible. I used a lot of their material in the book and I've placed a link to them in the description box for if you want to get them for yourselves. Now let's look at where we find the Sadducees in the Bible. The Sadducees appear by name in the Synoptic Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but they also appear in the book of Acts and Matthew under a term called chief priests and high priestly families. You see, unlike the Pharisees who originated among the common Jews who just thought to take certain Jewish practices more seriously, the Sadducees consisted of a few wealthy priestly families who managed to worm themselves into a position of power. Now let's talk about their origin. Do you remember Cyrus? Well, Cyrus was the king of Persia and he ordered for the Jewish temple to be rebuilt, which is what the Jews did. But he never ordered for the Jews to set up their own independent monarchy. So what happened? Well, the Jews wanted guidance from their own leaders and naturally saw the priests and scribes as people who were learned and able to guide them in truth. Thus, as the people would bring sacrifices to the temple, they would also sit under the teachings of their priests and scribes. The problem is that among some wealthy priests, there grew a common desire for more power and more wealth. These wealthy priestly families also bonded together in their common denial of the miraculous. And because of all this commonness among these few priestly families, a sect was born that was called the Sadducees. The Sadducees grew in power when the Pharisees so offended their Jewish king, John Hyrcanus, in the time of the Hasmonean dynasty between the Old and New Testament periods, that the king decided that he will rather start working with the Sadducees in an attempt to oppose the Pharisees' influence. The Pharisees, though, struck back when they opened the doors to Rome to infiltrate Jerusalem. The Pharisees then got the opportunity to kill many Sadducees and also obviously won the favor of Rome and the Jewish king then in power. The Pharisees kept their position of power until they started bumping heads with Herod, mainly because of religious principles. Thus Herod decided to favor the Sadducees, who seemed to be more supportive of Rome and Herod's rules. Because the Sadducees managed to obtain and keep Herod's favor, Herod would appoint the high priest from the Sadducean party. Now you can imagine that the Pharisees were not fond of the Sadducees. The Pharisees saw the Sadducees as a bunch of corrupt, money and power-hungry men who would compromise religious convictions in order to maintain their positions. They also did not like the fact that Herod, a non-Jew and Roman client king, had the right to appoint the high priest. Because of this phenomenon, the Essenes sect decided to break away from the Jerusalem temple altogether, and thus the Qumran community was formed. But most of the Pharisees interpreted this corruption of the priesthood as divine judgment by God and taught their followers the same. Now let's look at the role of the Sadducees. While the Pharisees were primarily a religious party seeking to abstain from politics as far as possible, the Sadducees, on the other hand, were primarily a political party, often using religion to achieve more political power. Thus, the Sadducees always made sure they posed no threat to Rome and would sacrifice religious commitment to do so. They also adopted the strict enforcement of law and order, that characterized Rome. And because they had Rome's favor, it became very hard for the Pharisees to push the Sadducees out, even though the Pharisees were more in number and had the common Jewish support. The Sadducees mainly used their political power to direct the Sanhedrin, of whom they formed the majority party at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, and to administer temple practices which formed the heart of Jewish religion. The Sadducees, that is the high priestly party, also headed the 24 orders of priests in and around Jerusalem where the temple was. Finally, just like there were scribes who came from the Pharisee sect, so there were also some scribes who came from the Sadducean sect and who taught the people according to their views. By the way, if you are finding value and you believe that I am not a Sadducee, then please support our channel by clicking on the like button. Thanks. Now let's talk about where they got the name Sadducee from. No, it was not because they were sad, you see. Many people think that the Sadducees got their name from Zadok, in that they believed that they were the legitimate offspring of Zadok, who was the man who was appointed by God as high priest in the time of David, according to 1 Kings 2 verse 35. But although Sadducee and Zadokite are very similar in Greek, it is unlikely that they thought themselves descendants of Zadok, since Zadok's descendants at the time were actually acting as priests among the Jews in Alexandria, Egypt. It is for this reason that John Hyrcanus and the Hasmonean kings before him held the office of high priest, because of the corruption of the Zadokite line among Egypt, right? Instead, F.F. Bruce suggests that their name originated from the Hebrew word Saddukim, which is a Hebraization of the Greek word synekoi, which means member of the council. This would also make most sense, since the first time we meet this group in history is in the Great Council, right? The Sanhedrin, where they acted as advisors to the king. It is interesting that they later wanted the people to make the link between the Hebrew word tzaddik, which means righteous one, and the Greek word for Sadducee, tzadukim, so that the people would think they are called Sadducee because they are the righteous ones. Now let's talk about the beliefs of the Sadducees. This sect was very liberal in their theology and therefore denied the supernatural things described in the Hebrew scriptures, the Christian Old Testament. Thus, Acts 23 verse 8 shows that they did not believe in the resurrection of the dead or in angels, while the Pharisees believed in a whole hierarchy of angels and a resurrection of the dead together with a judgment day. The Sadducees also did not hold to the oral law that the Pharisees emphasized so much, and according to some sources, they only believed in the first 5 books of the Hebrew scriptures, that is Genesis to Deuteronomy. That might be why Jesus proved to the Sadducees that there will be in fact a resurrection of the dead from the book of Genesis, even though one could argue that Daniel chapter 12 verse 2 to 3 might have clearer proof of the resurrection from the dead, namely because possibly they only held to the first 5 books of Moses to be authoritative. Now let's look finally at some lessons that we can learn from the Sadducean sect. First of all, we have to watch out for liberalism in our theology. The Sadducees, as mentioned, denied certain portions of scripture simply because they recorded supernatural events. There is a big movement in theological circles even today to establish what truly happened in the Bible, mainly based on whether it could be explained rationally. Therefore, Jesus walking on the water and virgin birth are all explained away by saying it is unscientific and therefore probably a legend that grew a tail. Secondly, we have to be aware of greed. The Sadducees literally got a whipping from Jesus because they misused the Passover feast and the people's need for animal sacrifices by turning it into a market to fill their own pockets. And lastly, we have to be aware of the love of power. The Sadducees compromised religious convictions in order to be in favor with Herod and to attain to and hold on to the high priestly position and control over the temple. So if God has placed you in a position of authority in your work, church, society, or home, then just remember that your authority is limited, borrowed, and that of an ambassador, meaning your decisions should reflect God's decisions. People, if you benefited from this video, then remember to subscribe to our channel to be notified of more content like this. Remember, I'll place a link to these great books in the description box below if you want to support our work and their work. And remember to watch one of these videos, especially the sect of the Pharisees, if you have not yet. Thank you for watching. God bless.